peace that we enjoy. May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. We ask that all in attendance and those who could not be here to assist in us in promoting good government. May our decisions as members of council be enlightened, and may we all be strengthened in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. May we be granted the wisdom, knowledge, will, and understanding to preserve the good fortune of the town for the benefit of all and to make good laws and wise decisions. Thank you all for attending. So we'll move on now to the approval of the agenda, and that the agenda of the regular council meeting of September 14, 2022 be approved as presented. A mover and a seconder, Councillor Rose, Councillor Levy, all in favor? As carried, thank you. We will now move on to the declaration of pecuniary interest, if anyone so has, so declare or at the appropriate time. Deputations and presentations, we have two this evening. First of all, we have a presentation from the Director of Planning, read the Tree Protection Bylaw and Tree Planting and Management Guidelines at the public meeting, and I will call on Andrea, our planner, and she's already at the mic.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council and the public. So this is just to give a quick overview of the proposed new tree protection bylaw that the town has been considering most recently at their August meeting. So the town currently has a bylaw, the tree cutting bylaw, that's from 2005. And so we have been reviewing that bylaw and considering updates to policies and strategic plans, our official plan, those documents, and are presenting a change to the bylaw that is a tree protection bylaw. It includes some tree planting guidelines and management guidelines as well to really help inform the town on how to best manage public and private trees. So this isn't just public lands, it would also impact private property owners. So on August, we launched the project website. We released a survey. It's on Connect Penetanguishene. There are some 10 questions on there that may be a little technical, but I encourage everyone to take part. And the notice of tonight's public meeting was given on September 1st. There was also an open house held on Monday, and I can say we did have some people come out. So there have been some surveys completed. We've got some public comments coming in, but the expectation is that we will not be coming back to council until the new year with the results of tonight's public meeting, as well as any changes to the bylaw. So with that, Your Worship, I will happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Do we have any questions through to the no public? No. Okay, thanks, Andrea. We will move on to B, presentation from Zajecki Planning, Town Dock Secondary Plan and Master Plan Parking Design Update and Official Plan Amendment, and it's also a public meeting. So it's a public meeting tonight under Section 22 of the Planning Act to consider an amendment to the town's official plan. The proposed amendment considers a secondary plan and master plan for the town dock lands. To council, the purpose of this public meeting is to provide an opportunity for the public to make comments. The purpose is not to engage in a debate regarding the merits of the proposal, nor is it intended to be a question and answer session. To the public, this is your opportunity to speak, and we encourage you to do so. In accordance with the Planning Act, if a person does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make written submissions before an amendment is passed or an approval given, you will not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and you may not be added as a party to a hearing on an appeal to the OLT unless, in the opinion of the OLT, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Please note that the County of Simcoe is responsible for granting approval of the official plan amendment. Any appeals will be to the County of Simcoe's decision on the proposal. And I will pass it on to our Director of Planning, Andrea Betty.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So as stated, this is a public meeting under the Planning Act. It is to consider an official plan amendment, and that official plan amendment will be to implement the secondary plan and the master plan for the town dock property. I can confirm that notice was given on August 18th of both the open house as well as tonight's public meeting. And pursuant to that, there were 4 comments submitted from the public, as well as 2 agencies that are part of a later staff report. So there have been those comments written formally to the municipality. In addition, the open house was held last Wednesday night, where there was about 25, I believe, in attendance, and comments received at that public meeting, as well as tonight's public meeting, will be considered by the TAC committee and staff. And the intention is to follow up later this year, probably close to the end of the year, with a follow-up report on this project. So with that, I do have David Sajecki here tonight, and he's got a presentation to go through. I will say it's been condensed a little bit from probably what's in your agenda package, but I'm going to welcome David here to give the presentation.
Thank you, David.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, and everyone for coming out tonight. I very much appreciate that. As mentioned, my name is David Sajecki from Sajecki Planning. Today, we'll walk through a similar presentation to what some folks saw last week. It's just been condensed. And if we turn to the next slide, please, I'll just speak to the agenda. So it's a summary of the reasons behind the project, why it came forward. I'll speak to the master plan. So that's really the conceptual design around the town dock. We'll briefly touch on the secondary plan recommendations themselves. So we have the draft schedules from the secondary plan that set the structure as well as a policy framework. We'll speak to what are some of the recommendations for implementation, and then we'll speak to next steps and questions from council. So next slide, please. And next slide, please. This slide indicates the area, the study area. So it's identified by red. To the south is the sewage treatment plant. To the west is Main Street, and surrounding the rest of the study area is the water. So it's 2.8 hectares in total. It includes the wharf and the launch ramp, the tourist information center, the dock lunch, as well as the parking area. And next slide, please. In terms of why the study commenced, there's direction from the strategic communication plan that the town will maximize the economic potential of the municipal waterfront. That's direction 1.1. Also within the strategic initiatives, very similar, states that the town will have explored redevelopment options for municipally owned waterfront property, including the town dock area. The 10-year capital plan identifies just a little bit more than 1.5 million in capital expenditures that are required for the town dock area. And the official plan, which was approved in 2018, identifies the area in red in the last slide as a future study area to look at, what could be the vision for that area moving forward. So next slide, please. This slide identifies the schedule that we've undertaken today. So it's been 2 years. The plan has evolved significantly since the initial concepts, and there have been a series of concepts that have come out throughout that time. There's also been transportation analysis that I'll speak to that has been undertaken, as well as economic analysis. And we're here just September 14th identifies the public meeting. Next slide, please. This identifies just some of the consultation activities that have been undertaken. In addition to this, we've also met with property owners, local businesses, Discovery Harbor, Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture, the Severn Sound Environmental Association, as well as the Georgian Legacy Boat Tours operator. And next slide, please. And actually, we just go into the next one as well, too. So this slide just identifies when we first started the study, we worked through kind of what were the big moves that we wanted to see implemented throughout the master plan. And there were 7 big moves that came up, and those were around the reallocation of space within the town dock, continuous public access to the water. So you'll see on the slides that follow that there's always a minimum of 15 meters public access to the waterfront. So all buildings are set back 15 meters, at least 15 meters, to create new public spaces for recreational use, to look at ways to unlock the economic potential. One of the things that we looked at early on was a hotel. It didn't make sense on this site economically for a few reasons. Ways to better connect the town dock through Main Street and to the parks, as well as to downtown, to establish gateways to the town dock, and then to look at flexible spaces on site too that can change and evolve as needed. Next slide, please. So these are a couple of not the very initial concepts, but the sort of the second iteration of concepts as they develop. These have since developed quite a bit further since, but some of the key areas within here is that a significant amount of the site initially was turned over to green space. It has since become more of an urbanscape space, and the parking has evolved as we've heard comments from residents as well as from council, which were directed to look at that further. It also identifies within this option, you can see it's kind of towards, it's a bit hard to, I don't have a pointer, but the pink area is identified as number 3. Those are commercial uses that were identified on site at the time. And then the big difference between option 1 and option 2, which is the next slide, is that option 2 was the option that looked at a hotel on site as well. So those have evolved quite a bit since these options came out. And option 2 on this slide is towards the north of the site, whereas towards the south is you have the town dock lunch and the tourist information center, as well as washrooms and kiosks. One of the key changes that we heard, if we actually turn to the next slide, the consultation that we received and the feedback we received from that consultation were that some of the most liked features was the continued public access. It was key that views be maintained towards the water through the site from the downtown and from other key corridors. There was comments that we did receive, but has evolved as well too, that they liked the less parking and more green space. They liked the boardwalk and the promenade, and they liked the inclusion of people-friendly spaces. We did hear that what was missing was that there was a need for more docks, more room around boating, connectivity and wayfinding, so meaning signage. That was needed to be explored further. Public facilities such as washrooms, continue to explore the use of commercial uses on site, and then more details around the boat launch and the hotel. We also heard both from the public and from council that there's a need to look at the parking in more detail. So Wood Engineering was brought on to look at, they created 6 options around parking, of which we'll speak to 2 of them. They ran turn templates to check maneuverability for boat launches as well as trailer parking. They added additional lane design for deliveries to the dock. Actually, if we turn to the next slide, it's probably the best way to speak to that. They added, so it's a little bit hard to view this, but if you look at along the wharf where the boat slips are, there's a setback there about 15 meters. That was identified. There's an additional lane design for deliveries to the dock, as well as for accessibility for users that they need to be dropped off to the boat launch. So that was added. 3 accessible parking spaces were added. Widened access points were added, as well as consolidated at one point off of Main Street. And the aisles were widened as well too. And access to the sewage treatment plant was maintained for trucks along the southern edge of the site. So if you turn to, actually we can stay on this slide for a second. So this identifies many of the main features of the site. Number 1 is a public plaza. Number 2 is a waterfront kiosk. So it's a space for rental for items such as, it could be to get a coffee. It could be for kayaks, rentals for other rentals for the space. 3 is the relocation of the tourist information center. 4 includes the public amenities that were spoken to, so shower and washroom facilities. 5 is the cruise boat shuttle and private vehicles drop off. So it's a kiss and ride is located in that area. Number 6 is the location of the dock lunch. 7 includes 3 accessible parking spaces. 8 is loading spaces for the dock lunch. 9 is spaces for electrical vehicle parking. 10, I guess I can run through each of these, is hybrid vehicle and trailer parking. 11 is set aside for trailer parking. 12 is the gate to the sewage treatment plant that is open for trucks. 13 is actually, you can't see it on here very well, but it's an elevated deck. So we'll see it in some renderings. It leads up to, it's above the town dock, sorry, the dock lunch, as well as the tourist information center. It's just a viewing area and observation area for the water. 14 is it's the boat launch. 15 is a waterfront promenade. It's a wood walkway that extends off from the walking trails to the south. And then I mentioned as well too that everything is set back for vehicles to be able to access the town dock for loading and for accessibility issues. So if you turn to the next slide identifies the parking details. And so six options were created by Wood. I know at the last meeting there were more questions around how this works and what this is identifying. So it identifies either 59 or 79 spaces. So under the 59 spaces options, it's 21 single vehicle spaces, 35 trailer spaces, and 3 accessible spaces. But 20 of the trailer parking can also be used for double single vehicles. So it can also work as, as 79 spaces, which would be 61 single, 15 trailer, 3 accessible, or a ratio in between. So next slide, please. This is option 2. Everything within the non-parking area is consistent with option 1, but the changes with here are related to parking. So if we can speak to parking on the next slide, it identifies here either 71 or 91 spaces. So that is 32 single vehicles. In the first way that this could be utilized, 36 trailer vehicles and 3 accessible parking spaces. Or the alternative is, again, 20 spaces can be used for either as trailer or for 2 single vehicles. So if they are used for 2 single vehicles, you could get 72 single spaces, 16 trailer spaces, and 3 accessible spaces. And that compares to the formalized parking that is on site right now, I believe is 89 spaces that are formally painted. That does not include the parking that is in the unpaved area around the boat launch right now. So next slide, please. And this is just focusing in more on the plaza detail. So you can see the majority of the space is hardscape. So that's the area in gray. Could be permeable paving. These plans are continuing to develop. We're still taking in feedback. So we can look at ways that this plan can continue to evolve. The green space is more identified as an area for picnics that will relates to the hardscaped area. You can see the access north-south along the waterfront that would generally be used for waterfront access, but can be used for loading and servicing as well. The dock lunch is in the, I guess it would be the bottom left-hand corner. So it'd be the southwest side of the image with the Tourist Information Center to the right of that. And there is a walkway up for a second-story observation desk. And a little to the north of that would be the kiosk that we had mentioned. So the next few slides are really just renderings of how the plan is envisioning what the area could evolve over time. And again, I will reiterate too that it is continuing to evolve. But the first image is looking southwest. So it's a bird's eye view looking over what that landscape space could be and looking towards the dock lunch and the Tourist Information Center. The next image on the next slide is looking north across the boat launch and towards the dock lunch. And the next image is looking from the water, looking east towards the town dock. The next image shows the Tourist Information Center. Again, this is all conceptual. None of the architecture has been developed, but it's an image looking towards that Tourist Information Center, towards the showers and the washrooms, and looking towards the formalized parking area, as well as the drop-off area. And you can see in the right side of that image, there is a stairway that could be incorporated in an elevator as well too for accessibility that leads up to that second-story observation area. Next slide just shows how the space could be utilized in the winter. We had talked about flexible uses, flexible spaces. So these are kiosks that could be introduced during, for example, Winterama. And the next slide is really just looking at a bird's eye view of the entire site. So that would be looking southeast. I guess you can see Main Street as well as the sewage treatment plant, and then the general outline of the town dock, the town dock itself. So next slide, please. I'll really quickly just walk through the schedules. The first one identifies the 2 land uses that are identified for the site. So the area in purple is identified as a downtown and waterfront area. The reason it's identified separately from the rest is because that designation is required to permit uses such as commercial uses, the dock lunch, the tourist information center, the kiosk, as well as the parking area. The rest is identified as major open space, but we're not thinking of it right now. We're still receiving feedback, but we're not thinking about that as traditional parkland. It's more of a hardscape space that can be used to host events and facilitate more of a gathering space than what you think of as a traditional green park. Next slide, please. And the next slide is a schedule identifying the movement and transportation. So it identifies access off of Main Street into the parking area, exit through that parking area as well too, and towards the south is access for the trucks as they would exit as they would move through the sewage treatment plant, exit the area. It also identifies connections in red to the existing trails, a multi-use trail system across the site, and areas where we're thinking of identifying space for bicycle parking and elements such as that. So the next image, please. This is the public realm framework, and the big arrows are identifying key view corridors that we think are really important to be protected. So the view through Main Street from downtown, the view from the parking between the dock lunch, as well as between the tourist information center towards the water. It also identifies areas that are identified for pedestrian priority. So that really is sort of that public space, that square, and it identifies a waterfront promenade that generally be identified as use for public access space, but also provides that opportunity for loading and access to the tour boats as required. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. The next slide just identifies the implementation tools that form part of the secondary plan. So as Andrea mentioned, it requires an official plan amendment. So that work is underway as of now, and this meeting forms part of that. There's a wayfinding and branding strategy that is recommended. So really, how does the town dock brand itself as part of a larger branding strategy with the rest of the town? How does signage improve to the town dock? There's an economic development strategy that was outlined at a high level within the plan. So it's developing further what we called the 4x4 strategy, which looks at over 4 years, hosting 4 events over 4 seasons for 4 different reasons. Parking strategy that needs to be looked at in more detail. And that is one of the recommendations to look at exactly how is parking going to work, both on-site as well as off-site, looking at lands that are municipally owned, such as the Curling Club and McGuire Park, and also private lands as well too, and on-street parking. And then finally, this is conceptual. That's what a secondary plan is about. So a really important step that has to tie into the capital expenditure program, capital expenditures is informing and developing further detailed design and infrastructure works. So with that, I'll just turn over to next steps, which Andrea has already mentioned, but it's finalizing, receiving input, finalizing that master plan and the secondary plan, then initiating the official plan amendment. And that's, hopefully I was relatively brief. So that's the presentation. Thank you. And I guess I can turn over to the mayor and council for questions.
Thank you, David. And is there anyone in the audience who wishes to make comments in opposition or in support of the application based on land use planning issues relevant to the application? We ask that you please state your name and address for the record. So if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or support, yes, sir.
Your worship, the mayor, deputy mayor and councilors, thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Stephen Graham. My wife Irene and I have been residents of Penetanguishene for the past 24 years. We built our dream retirement home here. We both grew up in Eastern Ontario, but moved to this area in 1976, shortly after we married. My wife nursed at the former Huronia District Hospital, now the Georgian Bay General Hospital. from its opening in 1976 until she retired in 2015. Chances are, if you, a friend, or a family member had been treated in the emergency department prior to 2015, my wife would have been involved in your or their care. I had a 35-year career at Elcan Optical Technologies in Midland, working as a tool designer, process engineer, and technical writer until my retirement in 2013. Except in places with extreme real estate prices, my wife and I have the freedom to live anywhere we wish in Canada. We chose and still choose to live in Penetanguishene. Yes, I suppose you could say this is our love letter to Penetanguishene. No, Penetanguishene isn't perfect, but we know of no better place for us. We love it here. This fine place we call home allows us access to the wonders of southern Georgian Bay. My wife and I are just completing our 40th season of boating on these waters. We are constantly in awe of the beauty of this unique and stunning place. We might merely anchor off Beausoleil Island for a few hours, have lunch, look at the water, sky, trees, rocks, and listen to the birds. We still can't believe how fortunate we are to have this magical place mere minutes from our home. Now I'm afraid I must turn into the crusty old Luddite with the unruly hair. The plan put forward for the town dock and associated launch ramp in its current form would severely limit the enjoyment of many residents and visitors. Look, I get it. Planners like to plan. It's what they do. When they see a space like our town dock area, you exercise your imaginations. Unfortunately, your compasses have sent your imaginations in the wrong direction. We have no need of a small addition to our already substantial supply of parkland with the proposed removal of the existing paved town dock parking area. I paid a brief visit to the town dock the morning, September 8th, after last week's meeting. The paved parking lot was almost filled with vehicles. The cruise boat was about to depart and looked nearly full. We are fortunate to have a cruise boat operating out of Penetang again. Lose that parking and you can kiss the cruise boat and its economic benefits goodbye. Human nature is such that people will not want to park elsewhere and be shuttled to the dock. And this is to say nothing of the capital and ongoing expense costs of operating a shuttle scheme. A similar scheme has been proposed for the launch ramp parking. Again, inconvenient, expensive, and from what I'm told by someone who participates in fishing tournaments, vehicles and trailers are more likely to suffer theft and vandalism when parked off-site. Other potential schemes were proposed at various stages of the process. Among them was dry stacking of boat trailers, a totally impractical suggestion that would again involve a large capital investment and ongoing costs. Surely no one can seriously suggest a boat owner is going to decouple their trailer and vehicle to have the trailer lifted and stacked. There are just too many variations in trailer for a start, and the potential for damage is high. One potential, let's call it a get out of jail free card some people like to employ, is stating, future technology might hold answers for us, or words to that effect. What they're really saying is, I don't have an answer for this, so let's just kick it down the road and get back to my agenda. Boat trailer technology, except for the switch to disc brakes and LED lighting, hasn't changed in decades and isn't likely to change anytime soon. If you haven't seen it in action, you can't really appreciate that launch ramp at peak times is a bit like a dinosaur ballet. The process may look haphazard, but there is an order and sense to it. Parking tow vehicles and trailers close to the launch ramp is essential for efficient operation. Any time spent retrieving a vehicle and trailer from a distant location would severely compromise the efficient operation of the ramp. At peak times, the process would bog down so much as to come to a virtual standstill. There would be vehicles backed up along Main Street waiting to get to the ramp, and boats waiting in the waters near the dock adjacent to the ramp. We have, during previous meeting, heard one person repeatedly say, go to a marina. Marina slips are expensive. A small boat owner could essentially spend the cost of his boat in a few seasons of marina fees. As well as small fishing type boats don't fare well and are more easily damaged in marina settings. A convenient explanation for the evolution of the plans we have in front of us is that workshops were held, or perhaps it was focus groups or strategic seminars. That may be, but did it actually include the people that use the dock and launch ramp? Did the committees, groups, or whatever talk to the dock master before beginning the plans? No, not according to the dock master. Were any residents with seasonal launch ramp passes polled for their opinions? I sure wasn't. Here's the thing. When you buy a pass, there's a copy with the purchaser's name and contact details kept by the dock staff. That would have been a perfect resource for contacting actual ramp users. I suggest that the plans we have been shown here with a vision of a person or persons that do not coincide with the wishes of the majority of users. Sejeki Planning, I think you have done a remarkable job at envisioning something, but here's the kicker. You have been sent on a fool's errand. The majority do not want your vision of a movie set, perfect little town waterfront. Besides not serving us in the way our waterfront currently does, it will discourage other usage and actually discourage business that is currently here. For one, do you think the cruise boat will stay in Penetang if their ridership drops because of an inconvenient parking situation? We have also seen many U-turns from Sejeki Planning. The backtrack on the ill-considered urban beach. The U-turn on the possible boutique hotel due to the proximity of the waste treatment plant suggests to me someone wasn't doing their homework. The large floating arced walkway that had to be downsized because it initially not only blocked the launch ramp, but blocked water access to the strip of private property just south of the ramp. It's a bit hard to take your big picture seriously when the nuts and bolts make no sense. As mentioned previously, the morning after the meeting last week, I was down to the dock and launch ramp. Unfortunately, due to a bereavement in my wife's family, I wasn't on the water myself. There were not many vehicles with boat trailers in the parking lot. In the 5 minutes or so I was there, one small fishing boat was hauled and a couple launched their wave runner. In an area with so much beautiful shoreline, a national park, and a provincial park, water access is mostly limited to those who own waterfront property. This is not envy on my part. If people have the money for shore property, I'm happy for them. What we must preserve is what amounts to the egalitarian access to some of the most magnificent water in the world. That the average person can enjoy this is due to the town dock, launch ramp, and their associated parking spaces that we currently have. In conclusion, let me be clear. We, the majority of town dock and launch ramp users, want no part in a reduction of the parking resources we now have. We are more than happy with a refresh or replacement of current structures, but say an emphatic no to the sort of grand schemes we've seen so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to make a statement in opposition or support of this application? Mr. Waters? Would you go to the mic, Bill?
I applaud the gentleman before me. His remarks were amazing. There's not much I can add to what he said, other than I don't think we can afford what he wants, what they want to do to the town dock. It's a lot of money. We're coming out of COVID. We're going into a recession. And I don't think, and we have other things that are in the future that the town's talking about doing that are going to be many millions of dollars. And I don't think this is a place to be spending money now. Pretty it up a little bit, but don't be spending millions.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi. So I don't know if I'd say that I'm opposed to it. I have concerns with it. So for sure, who doesn't want to see our waterfront improved? The The study looks beautiful. I want that. And I also want, as a boater, I want access to the waterfront. So in my thoughts originally, I'm thinking, okay, they sell maybe 250 parking passes a year, and the average family has 4 people. I know I do in my family. We're looking at 1,000 people in our town, which is maybe what, 14, 15% of our population do use that water access. And it is, and in addition to the people in our town, maybe who can afford to go to the marina. So I think, you know, if you want to have access to the town, we have to continue with the parking. We see some troubles if you relocate it to different areas. From another side of it, I think, you know, my workplace is often recruiting. I work at Waypoint. My husband works at the local jail. In this area, it's very hard to, you know, to get people to work at your workplace. So I think beautifying the town is one way for sure doing that. But another strategy is we often talk about our beautiful shores of Georgian Bay and all the things you can do in our area. And if they don't have access, that's going to limit people that we also need to come and work in our areas. So I think there's several concerns. I'm all for beautifying the town, but I think we have to look at the parking study. I was happy to hear that would be extended. I think that's a big piece. If that can be incorporated in the plan, then you probably would have my support. So.
Thank you. Ronnie?
I wish I would have wrote something. I would feel more confident, but I'm Ron Dalton. We own 2 properties in Penetang. We own my family home since 1967, 286 Church Street, and we own 57 Chatham Street that we built in 97, me and Diane. I've voted since 1973. I used to remember going down there and paying Ed Truckee at the town dock, my couple dollars to put our boat in, and we parked our trailer there. So I've done that since I was this big. And it's part of the reason I live here. I'm nervous. I think we're missing out. We have 85 slips. The most parking is like 60 slips or 60 parking spots. So if everybody that we rented a slip for a couple $1,000 parks, there's no room for anybody to go to the tour boat. There's nobody to go to the town dock. There's no room for a boat trailer to park. So yeah, nobody to go to the observation tower. I like the plan. I do think we need to beautify, but we have to figure out a way. I went down on Saturday. I didn't go down on Friday. I went down on Saturday at noon. At Saturday, when they were loading the boat up, there was over 100 vehicles parked there again. There was 15 for the slips and single parking. Like there was 55 cars with trailers and there were 65 cars. There was 13 parking spaces on the asphalt. That's all the pieces that they want to get rid of that. So then that 65 cars would have had to gone in the other parking. The tour boat wouldn't have been full. We had a nice couple last time at the meeting talk about Tobermory and they don't have parking. Where did our boat come from? Tobermory. Does that not tell you something right there? In the plan, how do you get fuel onto the tour boat? How do you get the sewage off the tour boat? How do the guys that own the businesses that go down and load their boats to go up the lakes to work? Our local small business owners use our town dock to get to the rest of the video on the town office or the town website, the gateway to Georgian Bay. I couldn't have said it better to myself. It is our gateway to Georgian Bay. I'm a local resident. I drove home from the jail yesterday. I counted 11 boats in driveways from the jail to my house at 57 Chatham. None of those boats are in docks. None of those boats. That's 11 people on that 2-kilometer drive that put their boat in to take their children out, their kids out. They work at Magna. They jump in their little outboard, go down. And like was said, they can't spend $3,000 to be at Bayport or at Beacon Bay, or because we lost our biggest marina in town. So they can't afford to park their boats in the water. They have them on a trailer. It saves me thousands of dollars. It gives me my fuel money for the summer. I drive 2 blocks to get into the water. I'm amazed, like he said, about how beautiful it is around here. We were at a friend's cottage in Cognizine this weekend. You forget how beautiful this area is. I wouldn't have been able to go up there. It's that stuff that keeps me here and keeps me a proud person in Penetang. I really hope you keep it. And I know it needs to be beautified. It's ugly. I haven't seen an attractive boat trailer yet. So I get the idea when you drive down there, it looks horrible. Oh my God, we parked them in front of the sewage treatment plant. That took a long time to build. And it is pretty for a sewage treatment plant. It is beauty. It is a nice looking sewage treatment plant. We need to be able to figure a way out to make our dock look attractive. I get that. We walk the park every day. We walked it tonight. I would love to see Ojibwe go that way with the park, but we can park the people at this end and they can walk that way. We need to incorporate the dock and all that. Absolutely. But I don't think we can afford to lose the parking spaces. I think it's more valuable to this town than people think it is. I put a post on Penetang Machine. I had hundreds of people comment on it right away. Like they don't all show up to come, but they want to keep it too. So I really hope you guys will consider that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Yes, sir.
Mike Armstrong. I live at 33 Bridle Road here in Penetang. I've lived here in town for 26, 27 years, lived in the area since 1989. I was involved in the tourism business for over 40 years, 43 years. I'm recently retired. I chose this area partly because of my work and partly because I'm a small town person all my life. And when I retired, I always wanted to be on the water. Life circumstance happened. I don't have very much money. I can't afford a cottage. I can't afford waterfront property. But before I retired, I bought a 14-foot, 4-inch boat with a 20-horse motor on it from a guy that bought it when he retired in 1995. And the one dream I had when I retired was to go out on Georgian Bay and explore it in its infinity. So I do. I remember the first day I took my son, who's now a graduate and left town, out on the water. And as I was learning my boat, and the oil pump stopped working, and I was out in front of Giant's Tomb on that little boat on a calm day. He missed his ball game that night because it took me over 3 hours to cripple my way back in. But that aside, I have a love for the area like these other folks have. Mr. Graham was a great first speaker here tonight. Applaud everything he said. One of the reasons a lot of people come to this town, and I promoted this town, I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce before I retired for almost 9 years, I believe. And I promoted the entire area. I was on the chamber when we talked about the economic development of the whole area, not just one town, and all the towns were coming together. Midland and Penetang and Tiny and the whole area here, we don't stand alone. Penetang doesn't have to just rely on our little waterfront to generate dollars for the economy. In the parking, for example, if you want to put a hotel or anything like that down there, where's that parking going to go, by the way? There's no parking now for the businesses that are there. Where are we going to put the parking for the people that come down? We advertise this beautiful gateway city town on Georgian Bay, and it does look impressive. And they come down here and there's no place to park. So do we push them all down on the side streets like they do in Victoria Harbor and other areas? And now we've got all the citizens complaining because there's all these people parked in front of their homes and whatnot. So now we have to get bylaws posted, and we can only park here and we can only park there. And as you so eloquently stated, someone did here, how far do you walk if you want to get out on the water without backing up everything, right? There's some pretty interesting, if you want to be entertained, just go down and watch the boat launch on a Saturday or Sunday. It's pretty entertaining. But anyways, I didn't write anything. I just saw the meeting today. So I just was making some quick notes here. We want to bring people in. Yes. We need to pretty it up. Yes. I've always been a big person being involved in outdoor tourism all my life. I try to make things aesthetically pleasing, inviting. I don't overpromise. I never overpromise to the public. I always promoted it in a realistic way. We paint a pretty picture down there, we're overpromising because when they get here, they can't actually access it. The local people that live in the downtown area where it's not too hilly, they're going to keep on walking. We've already got how many kilometers from the nice smelly sewage treatment plant on some days, all the way down to Champlain Road. What a beautiful area, except for right around the sewage plant. It smells some days down there. I can't see wanting to have a really nice green space around something that smells bad unless we can fix that smell. I just put my boat in and out, and some days it's in the water. You know, this spring was bad. I used to launch my boat in my bare feet. Now I put my rubber boots on because there's days when there's some effluent in there. It isn't very nice. So we shouldn't be overpromising something that's not there. This area sells itself. Nature sells itself. Georgian Bay sells itself. I just spent the weekend up out Blackstone and up in through that part of Georgian Bay with some friends. And man, the undeveloped nature is beautiful and it sells itself and it gets more people coming to the area. We don't have to build something extravagant when we can't pave our streets and patch our holes and have a good arena that doesn't have metal seats to freeze your arse off. We don't want to get into that kind of a situation again. And, you know, that was money that was not spent well. And we don't want to do that down here. And we don't want to detract from citizens that aren't rich, that want to enjoy the area that they pay taxes in and have lived in all their lives. My kids don't know any other town. My daughter's now teaching here. She wants to be here. She wants access. There was a slide there about winter activities. Where do you put the winter snowmobilers that come in and access their cottages and explore the lake? Those guys spend a lot of money around here. The ice fishermen too. Where do you park them? Your envision statement for this exercise talks about it being inclusive. This plan has to be inclusive. We little people with our little boats that can't afford the marinas, and the marinas can't afford to have us there either, by the way, because they have no land, they have no parking. They'll take your money, sure. We'll launch your boat. We'll take $50 or whatever a launch. But where are they going to park you? I'm a single person. Does that mean I launch my boat, drive my car home someplace from the marina, get a taxi to go back to my boat, and then do the same at the end of the day? We don't have the infrastructure for that locally, even though we have so many marinas. Anyways, we need to be inclusive. Beautiful view they talk about in some of the plans of the bay. Some of the best views are already here. They're here at the end of the lake, of the bay, looking down, not just looking across from our dock area across to the other side and seeing houses. The beautiful view is at the bottom end on the beautiful rotary trail that's already established. Sitting there, it's peaceful and quiet and looking up the length of the bay. So I oppose it from a point of view that we're eliminating access to the very people of our town that have always had access to it. And we don't want to build the downtown like Midland has, where you get all these people and they have no place to park. And we've seen what parking does in Midland lately. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Miss. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And I might add it if there is anyone who wishes to speak, I get it that everyone is basically in opposition of a parking matter. So I don't know that we want to have anyone else go up and speak and repeat the same thing. It's around that same area. So I think I would just ask David if he has any concluding comments.
But I don't want to get up there.
Through your worship, sorry, Andrew just needs your name and address for the objection. No.
Chris Foley, 46 Field Street.
Hang on. Jim, what was your address?
6 Gateway Lane.
Okay, do we have everyone with names and addresses? Okay, so David, if you would.
Thank you, through your worship. I'll first start off just with 2 points of clarification that I want to make, and I don't mean to be confrontational about this. With respect to the stack parking, that was never a recommendation from the consultant team. That came up at a public meeting where a member of the public suggested that. That was never considered. And then also with the hotel, for clarification on that, it was a request of the study to look at the hotel. We looked at a hotel and determined that it could not be there, both because of the location of the sewage treatment plant, because of parking, because of economic development. It was never a recommendation of the study to put a hotel on site. So I just want to clarify both of those comments. And then I want to start too. I actually don't think we are quite as far apart in terms of vision as what I'm hearing tonight. I want to say, and what I heard last week as well too. And I want to say that there is nobody on the consultant team, and I don't believe there's anybody, I know there's nobody with staff as well too, who wants to develop a plan that the town residents do not want. I think that's pretty well understood. I mean, I have family in Perkinsville. I have family in LaFontaine. My family has a farm on Concession 8. I had dinner with my mom just before I came here, which was great. It was my grandparents' farm. I used to come down to the dock lunch in the 80s when I was a little kid. Whenever there was a special dinner, that's where my grandmother would take me for lunch. Like, we are looking for ways to improve that area. I don't think the plan is quite there. We have spoken with the snowmobiling community. And under option 2, within the winter, when trailer lots or trailer spaces are not being used, there's 91 parking spaces that are identified in the plan. That's actually more than the formalized parking spaces that are there right now. It does not include the boat launch. I mean, but what I want to say is that more than anything is that we still hear you and the plan is still developing. And I don't actually think that we're not trying to take the boat launch away from that site within the plan. So I don't think there is.
Excuse me, Sharon, but everyone has had the chance to make their comments. We're wrapping up.
Yeah, those are my comments. I'll just end on that. But thank you, everybody. Oh, I will actually add one more thing just before I do end. We did have conversations with the operator of the Georgian Legacy tours, and it's correct that they have operated boat tours in Tobermory, and from a tour boat operational perspective, he did not have concerns around a shuttle bus. He did not have concerns around access to the boat. He said that's how it works in Tobermory, and it's worked quite well for them. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you, David. Members of council, are there any members of council who wish to ask a question on the information presented? Councillor Mayat?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a little thing maybe I want to throw in there is like, of course, we're all interested of having the tourists to come down to our town dock. And I pulled some numbers just to show you the amount of people that actually come down to our town dock.
Councillor Mayat, it's a question that you put forward, not comment, please.
Well, my comment is like from July the 11th to July the 18th on the T&E, the counter they had, there was 9,519 vehicles that went through the town dock parking lot. So like some people are saying, we need more parking.
Okay. Members of council, further questions? Okay, so there are no further comments. I thank.
Worship.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship.
Question
Just
on
a question to staff. There's a suggestion in the PowerPoint presentation about next steps and implementation tools. And one of the points under the implementation tools is the parking strategy. And we've been hearing a lot about parking and how to park, where to park, trailers where they could park. And I was wondering from a timing perspective, if that's something that we could consider moving up in our process before perhaps we move to finalizing anything from an official plan standpoint, that maybe that might be something we may want to tackle first. I just throw that out because certainly I'm hearing a lot last week and this week with respect to parking, and that might inform and provide additional information that may be helpful as part of the design. Thank you.
Andrea?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Vatabancourt. I think you'll probably see something like that in the upcoming budget.
Okay, so we thank everyone for attending tonight and participating, and council will consider the application and the results of the public meeting at a future meeting. Thank you. That'll be done. Okay, moving on to 6, the adoption of minutes not already confirmed, and that the following minutes of council meetings be confirmed and adopted as circulated. Council, August 10, 2022. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Rose, Councillor Cummings. Any questions, concerns with these? No, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to consent agenda 7, and the recommendation action is that the following consent agenda items having been given due consideration be received for information, and a memo to council re short-term rental licensing bylaw update. Mover and the seconder, Councillor Cummings, Deputy Mayor. Questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Vatabancourt.
Thank you, Worship. This is a consent agenda item, and I'd like to speak to it. So may I speak to it under this?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I just want to point out in the memo that staff prepared that 34 issues were identified by the public, by members of council with respect to the short-term rental licensing bylaw. And 12 changes were made to the bylaw to incorporate the suggestions that were made by the public and members of council. A number of items were already covered in existing bylaws, such as regulating fireworks, regulating property standards. Those things are already covered under other bylaws. So it was just noted that those things would be addressed there. There are 16 fine categories in the bylaw. 13 of those 16 fine categories have been increased. And that was a request that council made at our last meeting when we were talking about this, that we wanted the fines to increase to act as a deterrent. So I think staff have done a good job in terms of listening to the comments that were received. We still have issues. We will see on the council information package that there were letters from residents that were impacted by a disrespectful property owner who leased their place out as a short-term rental. We're still going to have to deal with that. But I think that once we have a licensing bylaw in place, that'll give staff the tools to be able to deal with those types of disrespectful short-term rental operators. In the staff report, it talks about that the bylaw may evolve as it comes into effect, and staff will work and identify areas for improvement. And when that happens, members of council, I'd like to see not only members of the public, but also short-term rental operators being involved in that review if staff are of the view that the bylaw needs some tweaking or some changes. I think that with experience out there in terms of the application of the bylaw, we may learn some things, not only from the operators, but from members of the public that are affected. So thank you, Worship. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Bodemarqueur, and I think that these matters are probably something that can be taken into consideration. Councillor Levy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank staff for the hard work they've done on this. It's getting better. It's a lot of issues. The issues have been dealt with appropriately from one report to the next. I was pleased to see I'd been advocating for the smaller units, especially the small units in owner-occupied properties, to be less than the larger party houses, whatever. And I'm pleased to see that that was done and it was addressed in the latest report. I think that the key is going to be the enforcement, the third-party organization who we contract to help with enforcement, our own bylaw office, and things have to be really in place by next spring to respond quickly and work towards shutting down those that continuously violate the rules and upset the neighbors. So hoping for the best here. It's come a long way, and I really do thank staff for their hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Levy. Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one quick comment. As everybody knows, I've opposed it. I still will be opposing it. I'm glad that staff did what they did, but I'll still be opposing it. I look out here tonight and say we've got all this council time, all this staff time, all the legal fees, all of this for the purpose of what? It does absolutely nothing for our town. We're spending money. We're going sideways. It's just scrap the whole thing. Don't bother having them, period. We'd be way better off.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. As council's aware, I have been saying that we're not ready yet to enforce these bylaws and give some more teeth to them. After reading the updates to this bylaw, I think we are ready. I think we still are able to tweak this once it comes into effect, but I think we are ready at this point to start enforcing this bylaw and to have it come into place.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. And I might point out the fact that included in the whole process is that it will be reviewed in 12 months. So
Your worship.
Councillor Sinema.
Thank you, your worship. I do want to reiterate the hard work that the staff has put into the report, and it is imperative that a licensing bylaw be implemented so that the parameters are established to make sure that we can go ahead and get all of those bylaws and the operations in order. My only suggestion is that the follow-up report is going to be in 12 months, and I would like to see it done in 6 months. I know it's a short period of time, and it may not be the time maybe they won't be as used as much in that first 6 months, but it will certainly be a time to check and see how things are going from a licensing perspective.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, your worship. I just wanted to compliment staff as well. This has come a long way from the beginning. And we definitely need some rules in place. Councillor LaRose, I think we need the proper tools in place to be able to respond to that small percentage of people that are making life miserable for others. We need the tools in place to be able to go to the party houses, to those individuals that are renting to too many people and they're having too many guests. So I think this bylaw is going to be able to give us the tools to do that. So I disagree with your comment. Thank you.
Okay, further comments, members of council? One thing I might add and point out, Councillor Sinema, you mentioned about the 12 months versus 6 months, is that we have to remember that it does not take effect until January 1, and at which time they have 30 or 60 days to register as a licensee. So that brings you to basically May or June, which doesn't really give us enough time to see how well it's going to work or not work. So I would think that I would still like to see it stay at the 12 months.
Hey, you turn your mic off.
Mover and a seconder, Councillor Cummings, Councillor Levy, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. Matters for consideration. A, advance procurement of Harriet Street reconstruction and to incur costs in 2022 for soil characterization. ENG 2022-13. That staff be authorized to proceed in 2022 with the procurement process for the reconstruction of Harriet Street from Jeffrey Street to Edward Street, and that the approximate cost for this project of $20,000 be allocated from the Development Charges Reserve Fund, as $30,000 is currently allocated to this project in the 2023 capital budget. Ryan, do you have any comments or concerns here?
Through you, Your Worship, unless there's any questions related to the report, I think it's fairly self-explanatory.
So, Councillor Cummings, did you have a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question. Why are we taking it from the Development Charges Reserve?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Cummings, a certain portion of the project is allocated to growth. It is a reconstruction project where we're replacing existing assets, but through our development charges study, we've allocated a certain portion of the costs allocated to growth, and that's how we're proposing to fund the excess soils management piece.
That is a little bit of a stretch, don't you think?
Yeah, again, in terms of the growth portion of the project, it is only a small portion, which is $20,000 to $30,000 of the actual overall project, which is in excess of, I believe, almost $1 million. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions or concerns? Mover, Councillor LaRose, seconder, Councillor Sinema, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to B, Harbor Point Subdivision Phase 4 Subdivision Agreement, ENG 2022-15, that the town of Penetanguishene enter into a subdivision agreement with Belil / Penetang Developments Limited for Harbor Point Subdivision Phase 4 upon the fulfillment of the requirements outlined in Section 3 of the agreement, and that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the subdivision agreement for execution. Any questions, concerns, or comments on this issue? There being none, mover and a seconder, Deputy Mayor, seconder, Councillor Vadeboncoeur, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to C, background to public meeting on proposed tree protection bylaw and tree planting and management guidelines, PL 2022-42, that this report be received for information and that staff be directed to prepare a report on the results of the public meeting. And I think we've heard about that already this evening. So mover, Councillor Clue, and mover, Councillor Cummings, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. Town Dock Secondary Plan and Master Plan Parking Design Update and Official Plan Amendment, PL 2022-41. Recommended action is that this report be received for information and that staff be directed to prepare a report on the results of the public meeting. So we have heard considerable amount tonight. Councillor Cummings are moving, and seconder, Councillor Levy. Okay, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. Presentation and consideration of report, committee of the whole report, that the recommendations contained within the committee of the whole report related to recreation and community service section be approved. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Cummings and Deputy Mayor Dubo. Any questions or concerns? All in favor? That the recommendations contained within the committee of the whole report related to the planning and development services section be approved. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Levy, Councillor Vadeboncoeur, all in favor? Carried. That the recommendations contained within the committee of the whole report related to transportation and environmental services section be approved. Mover, Councillor Clue, and seconded by Councillor LaRose, all in favor? And that is carried. And that the recommendations contained within the committee of the whole report related to the finance and corporate services section be approved. Moved by Councillor Sainamon and seconded by Councillor Mayat. Comments or concerns? There being none, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. Presentations and consideration of reports, special committees, there are none. Motions of which notice has been previously given, there are none. Notices of motion, there are none. Consideration of bylaws. Bylaws 2022-39 being a bylaw to license, regulate, and govern short-term rental accommodations. 2022-45 a bylaw to establish an appointed joint compliance audit committee. 2022-46 being a bylaw to authorize the entering into a waterfront license agreement with Clarence Morrow for the use of town lands for the provision of food and beverages to members of the public. 2022-47 being a bylaw to appoint property standards officer for the corporation of the town of Penetanguishene. And so that the council of the town of Penetanguishene introduces those following bylaws that be read a first time, deemed to be read a second and third time, and carried. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Cummings, Councillor Levy, all in favor. And that is carried. Question period from media and the public. No questions from the media and the public. Therefore, I go to announcements and inquiries. Does anyone have any announcements or inquiries? Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to let the public know that there are many great events coming up at our Centennial Museum in October. Some of them might already be sold out, so I don't want to list exactly what dates there are and such, but there are walking tours. You'll find a whole bunch of things for Halloween and many cool things happening. Next week as well, the museum is participating in the surrounding communities are doing Indigenous Art and Culture Week. And there's a spiritual workshop being hosted with Patricia Monag, and it's Wednesday, September 21st at 7 p.m. If you can't make that workshop, please note that there's also still the Drummond Islanders exhibit up all week. Thank you.
Thank you. And I might announce that tomorrow is the seniors barbecue at the museum from 11 till 2. Further announcements or inquiries? There being none, we'll go to the confirmation bylaw 2022-48. The confirmation bylaw 2022-48 be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk, mover and a seconder. Councilor LaRose, Councilor Santama, all in favor? And Councilor Cummings, we are adjourned. Does council wish to take a 5-minute break? Okay, so that I see yes. So we'll have a 5-minute break before our committee of the whole meeting.
If council could please return to their seats.
Okay, council and staff, we are ready to go with committee of the whole, Wednesday, September 14th, and we'll call the meeting to order, going with the approval of the agenda. Committee of the whole agenda, September 14, 2022, that the committee of the whole agenda for September 14, 2022 be approved as presented. Mover and a seconder, Councilor Rose, Councilor Mayat, all in favor, and that is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest, if anyone so has, declare or at the appropriate time. We have presentations and delegations, all sections, and tonight we have a presentation from PSD Citywide, re 2022 Asset Management Plan, and I will pass it to our Transportation Environment Director, Brian.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. The presentation being brought forward tonight is from our asset management consultant from PS Public Sector Digest. And we've been working with them, staff have been working with them closely over the last 2 years to prepare our asset management software, which is citywide, also provided by Public Sector Digest. And he's been working with our asset management coordinator, Andrew Jones, who's in the audience tonight. And the presentation is a summary, a Coles Notes version of our asset management plan, which is the second phase of the province's asset management regulation, which requires all municipalities to prepare a asset management plan for their core infrastructure by July 1st of 2022. There are other phases to the requirements which come in later years, but the presentation tonight centers around our core infrastructure being roads, water, and sewers. So without further ado, Ahmad Alvi from Public Sector Digest.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. Good evening. My name is Ahmad Alvi, and I'm an asset management advisor at PSD Citywide. I'm very happy to be here today and to be presenting you with the town's 2022 asset management plan. Next slide, please. Oh, I didn't turn it on. Yep. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me now. Perfect. I'll speak a little bit louder. Can we get the next slide, please? Perfect. So before diving into specifics, I wanted to make two acknowledgements. First is the appreciation of town staff in developing this AMP. They've worked tirelessly and diligently with our team to bring this AMP to you today. And the second acknowledgement is the limitation and constraint that this AMP faces, primarily the data that has been used to develop it. We acknowledge that there is work to be done in improving the town's central asset inventory, and it is a recurring recommendation within the AMP that we continue to improve and refine the asset inventory so that the output values are accurate and reliable. All right. As part of our project within the town, the primary deliverable was the asset management plan, but we also had secondary deliverables dedicated to improving the town's asset inventory. And to support those deliverables, as well as the AMP, We held several workshops and conducted extensive data analysis, data consolidation, and refinement to develop an updated asset inventory for the town within the citywide software. Next slide, please. So I'll give a bit of a background on asset management, but all of us by now should be familiar with asset management. But in the municipal context, asset management aims to cover the three key questions, which is what do we own and how do we manage it? What services we provide and what services we provide with the assets we own, and how do we ensure accountability to our residents and stakeholders? So with that in mind, next slide, please. I wanted to highlight something from the 2019 Canadian Infrastructure Report Card, which was that across Canada, a large proportion of municipal infrastructure is in fair condition, and that the majority of the infrastructure is more than 20 years old, and that stormwater infrastructure is the most unknown. So like municipalities across Canada, if you compare the condition of the town asset portfolio, which is at 84% in fair or better condition, it's roughly the same as the national asset portfolio, which is about 89% in fair or better condition. Put simply, the town is facing the same issues as other municipalities across the country, which is aging infrastructure, climate change and extreme weather events, and the general market trends, which we've seen in the last couple of months taking quite a bit of a downturn. Next slide, please. Again, just a high-level definition of what asset management is, now that we know the context and the reasoning behind why it's being pushed. ISO 55000 defines it as the coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from assets. In the municipal context, we can put three key parameters to realize, to study and analyze, and then to use them to define the value or the level of service that the asset is providing. So you have the cost that's associated with the asset, the risk that's associated with the asset, and the performance of the asset, all coming together to bring a level of service or value. Next slide, please. I won't stay too much on this slide, but this is the typical asset management framework that you'll see. And a lot of these activities and items the town has already covered. But the three stages are roughly assess, plan, and implement. I won't go through the list there, but a lot of this has already been covered and done by the town and will continue to be conducted. Next slide, please. The other key deliverable that we talked about that Brian referred to was the development of a centralized asset inventory. As part of this project, we went through a lot of consolidation of various data sets into the centralized software and into the centralized inventory with the hopes of using that as the primary inventory for the town. Across Canada, in our experiences in working with other municipalities, the lack of data standardization has been an issue. So a lot of effort and time has gone to developing that inventory for the town, and there will be an effort ongoing as well. Next slide, please. All right, so I'll put a brief, a high-level recap of the Ontario regulation, which is where the requirement of the AMPs are coming from. So like Brian said, this year is 2022, which is OREG requires us to have an AMP for core assets, which is your bridges, culverts, roads, water, wastewater, and stormwater. For this AMP, we've expanded on that a little bit. We've also included non-core assets, which is your buildings and facilities, your parks and land improvement assets, machinery and equipment, and vehicles. The reason we did that is to just get an idea of what to expect for 2024, which is when the actual requirement necessitates us to have those non-core assets included in the AMP. At least gives us an idea of what to expect for 2024. So again, for 2024, the scope expands to cover non-core assets, but the requirements stay the same. 2025 is the bigger update, which is where we are required to develop proposed levels of service for the next 10 years, and updated inventory analysis, and a robust lifecycle management strategy, as well as a financial strategy to address shortfalls, and a discussion of how growth assumptions have impacted the lifecycle and financial strategy. Next slide, please. So after 2025, what is expected of municipalities? Well, the AMPs must be updated at least once every 5 years, and that after 2025, council shall conduct an annual review of its asset management progress on or before July 1st, and that the AM policy and plans be posted on the municipal website. That's the gist of the regulation. Take the next slide, please. Okay, now we can talk about the high level portfolio or the high level asset management plan. Covering three key questions here. What is the current state of municipal infrastructure? What process improvements we can take to increase confidence in analysis and decision making? And what is the town's financial capacity to meet long-term capital requirements? Next slide, please. So over there on the slide, you'll see the overall cost of the asset portfolio based on current pricing, totaling out to be about 284 million. So putting that into per household, you're looking at about $71,000. Next slide, please. And this is another key point that I wanted to bring up. So you'll see that a lot of the calculations of the costing has been derived from what we call defined replacement costing. So that's unit costing, costing provided by tenders and bids, which is almost always and definitely more accurate than historical cost indexing. So for this AMP, 81% of the cost has been derived from that defined replacement costing, as opposed to 19%, which has been just using inflating the historical cost to current costing based on CPI indexes. And a key point here is that the accuracy and reliability of life cycle costs is critical for asset management. Next slide, please. The overall condition of the asset portfolio is at 84%, which, like I said before, is in line with the 2016 infrastructure report card. Oh, I'm sorry, the 2019 infrastructure report card. Next slide, please. Which takes us to another key recommendation, the use of assessed condition data over age-based condition data, which basically relies on the age and the install year of the asset, which almost always overstates the needs and overall deficit. So assessed condition data is critical in decision-making as well as asset management. Next slide, please. So I've just put together just 3 key points there that highlight the benefit of assessed condition data. I'll just go through them very quickly. Mitigation of risks associated with asset failure, identifying the most economic intervention, and accurate prediction of future expenditure requirements. Next slide, please. Collectively, the age of the portfolio states that it is about 71% of the assets are over 25 years old. Again, in line with the overall national portfolio. And that, next slide, please. And that the service life remaining, so basically about 13% of assets may require replacement in the next 10 years. I say may because it's possible that they are still functioning and that their established useful life may need to be revised and reviewed, but 13% may require replacement. Next slide, please. Another component of asset management is documenting your life cycle strategies and developing life cycle models. We all know that as part of asset deterioration, costs to rehabilitate increase towards the end of life. And so timely intervention leads to lower total cost overall. Next slide, please. So as part of that framework, we went ahead and we documented and developed life cycle models for your core linear assets, and then high-level models for your non-linear and non-core assets. The example there on the slide you'll see is your HCB roads. And we know that the town has a robust roads preventative maintenance plan, which was helpful. And we were able to capture some of the key activities from that plan and put that into a formal life cycle model. You'll see there the cost benefit of doing the right thing at the right time. For this example there, for HCB roads, you're looking at a cost benefit of about 2.8 million. And another thing I just wanted to point out is the consistent level of service that's being provided there, with the road, HCB roads generally stating or being in a good to very good condition throughout its life, for the majority of its life, I should say. Next slide, please. The other side that we did was risk framework. So developing risk models for your core, detailed models for your core linear assets, and then high level models for your non-linear and non-core assets. So the equation we put, the established equation is that the risk is equal to probability of failure multiplied by the consequence of failure. And as such, we used various attribute data points like asset condition, pipe material, service life remaining for the probability of failure. And then on the consequence of failure side, we established data points like replacement cost, the average annual daily traffic, road design, the pipe diameter, asset function, to come up with an overall risk framework for all the asset portfolio. Next slide, please. So putting that together, putting them into the citywide software, and then running and generating a risk matrix, you'll see there on the slide, basically highlighting all of the assets that are currently at a high risk, all of the assets that are currently at a low risk, and those assets in the middle. So another key point there is that a good risk model will assist in prioritizing resources and applying them to the right asset at the right time. Next slide, please. And then eventually lead you to operationalize the actual risk matrix itself. The example on the slide there, you can see how you can identify the high risk assets right away and either take the appropriate action, whether it's inspection, rehabilitation, or outright replacement. So a good risk model, once again, will help you identify which assets pose the highest risk to delivering the town's objectives and to drive the capital planning process forward. Next slide, please. So with all of that documented and developed into the citywide software, we were able to run long-term and short-term forecasts. The slide there covers the 10-year forecast that you see, covering core and non-core assets with spikes there. Next slide, please. And then we ran longer-term forecasts. So this is a long-term forecast of about 148 years. And the reason we chose that year is because we wanted to get at least one asset in for replacement. So at least every asset has gone through one full replacement within that forecast. Next slide, please. With the data consolidated and refined, we were able to generate annual capital requirements. So average annual capital requirements for the town are about 6.1 million per year that's needed to cover the infrastructure and replacements and capital requirements. The current funding that's available is about 2.3 million, which brings us to a deficit of about 3.8. Put differently, you can say tax-funded assets are currently funded at 46% of their long-term capital requirements, and rate-funded assets are currently funded at 23% of their long-term capital requirements. I'm just going to highlight it with another slide, please. With another graphic there, you can see what categories are being funded at what level, what is needed, and how much they're being funded at. And translating it to another graphic, next slide, please, is the actual reinvestment rates. So you'll see there that the town's target reinvestment rate for its capital should be 2.2%. The actual rate is 0.8%. That might sound like a big difference, but in the 2016 Canadian Infrastructure Report Card, it was found that across Canada, the average rates were actually from 0.3 to 1.7%. I didn't state that in the slide because it is a 2016 report card, but just wanted to highlight that it is fairly common and something that all municipalities are experiencing. Next slide, please. So as part of the A&P and as part of our project, we also put together a financial strategy of achieving and getting and reducing eliminating the infrastructure deficit. So for tax-funded assets, we'd recommend average annual increase of about 1.6% over the next 10 years, totaling a tax increase of 19%. For sanitary rate-funded assets, we'd recommend an average annual tax increase of 1.4% over the next 20 years. And then for water rate-funded assets, we'd recommend an average annual tax increase of 1.9% over 20 years. Now, I will preface this by saying that it is based on current available data and asset inventory, so it is subject to change as more data becomes available. And it is not a formal recommendation by any means. It is purely based on the inventory that is available to us and the funding that we've gathered and documented. Next slide, please. All right, and finally, I'll kind of put a high-level recommendations and next steps. First is to continue to review and refine the asset inventory in consultation with internal departments and stakeholders. It's very critical that the input that goes into the development of an A&P or forecasting is accurate. That old saying, garbage in, garbage out applies. So one critical recommendation throughout the A&P is the need to continuously review and revise the data. The second recommendation is to prepare for OREG, the 2024 and 2025 requirements. like we said earlier, for 2024, it now expands to non-core assets, which will require the town to develop levels of service statements to identify levels of service metrics for the 2024 requirement. And then for 2025, it's the identification of proposed levels of service that's required. And then a second for the 2025 is also to develop a medium to long-term external communication strategy to engage the public on asset management and obtain feedback to inform development of proposed levels of service. And lastly, continuous improvement and regular review. An asset management plan is a living document that should be updated regularly to inform long-term planning. And one other point, just from our work together, has been the operationalizing of the asset management database through its functionality. Like I said before, the citywide software has risk frameworks and lifecycle strategies that are stored in it now, and reports can be run based on those that will help guide decision-making and forecasting. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Members of council, do you have any questions? Councilor Rose.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the presentation. Looks good. Lots of info, very interesting stuff. My question is, obviously this isn't the first one you've done or other ones. So how would we compare in our end of Ontario for towns of our size?
Through you, Sir Worship, I would say we're on the same scale. It's tough to quantify, but from my experience and what I've seen my team work on, I think it's the same scale. Everybody's facing the same issues. Nobody has, funding is still a requirement. Everybody needs funding, and the reinvestment rates are the same. So yeah, it's tough to answer that. I think on average, they're roughly the same as others. That's the best answer I can give.
Further questions, Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question on your annual capital requirements versus the capital funding. Is that a historical chart that I'm seeing here, or is that just based on a previous year or two?
So through you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor. It is based on the sustainable revenues over the last 3 years. So 2020, 2021, and 2022, the budget. And then the capital funding requirements are basically generated from citywide. So they take into account the longer term forecast. That's why I showed the longer term forecast. So the 6.2 or 6.1 million that's required annually factors in it for the life of the assets.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Members of council? Councillor Buddenwalker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, good presentation, very informative. Question with respect to the replacement value for the buildings, facilities that are outlined in your report. Was there a discount provided, or was that actual replacement value that's outlined in the report?
So through you, Your Worship, great question. I think for buildings and facilities, we used a combination of the property insurance assessments as a replacement cost source, as well as the historical cost indexing. And then I think some was derived from the 2019 building condition assessments that were done. So a whole bunch of sources. So yeah, primarily coming from the property insurance assessment that was provided to us.
Thank you. It's something that it stood out to me because I think the whole portfolio, $8 million, if I recall correctly, and it just seemed low for center, town hall, fire hall, having a value of 28 million. So I was just curious.
Yeah, it's very possible because buildings and facilities is an interesting case because a lot of municipalities have not fully componentized their buildings inventory. If we were to go through that whole componentization, I am fairly certain the cost would rise. What we were looking at here was just the costing derived from the insurance assessment, as well as whatever number of assets were there in the inventory for buildings and facilities. So like I mentioned before, many municipalities have yet to fully componentize their buildings and facilities. So we're looking at a pooled listing rather than an actual component by component cost of the building. So when 2024 comes, and I hope by then we have some degree of componentization, I would expect the cost to be higher and go up and be accurate or reliable, I guess.
Thank you.
Our deputy treasurer, our treasurer has a comment or a question. Carrie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to further, in response to Councillor Vadaboncourt's question about the cost replacement values of the buildings. So I think when we were gathering that information, like Imad mentioned, it was from various sources for what we had. And from that, we are going to be bringing forward a 2023 project in terms of doing formal building cost replacement evaluations, appraisals, whatever the case may be, to bring our insurance values to a more reasonable value, as well as we would obviously update our asset management plan.
Any the questions, concerns? There be none. Imad, thank you for a very informative report, and thank you. Moving on to the council information package of August 24, 22 and September 7, 2022. Do any members of council have anything that they want to pull from this? There be Councillor Sinema.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was just a couple I did want to pull from the September 7th
And
information package. They are the 2A, regarding John Dubo, just acknowledging about his accomplishment of winning the gold across Canada, and also although we've already discussed the short-term rentals, there was an issue that I want to bring forward regarding 2B that we could share, and also 3A highlighting the public letter from Adam Chambers regarding Simcoe North, and those just to bring it to the public's attention.
very good. Yes,
Sorry, there's one more.
go ahead.
And for D and E regarding the Strong Mayor's Building Homes Act, I wanted to ask council to support the Wasaga Beach and Severn Township proclamations about the Strong Mayors.
Good. That's it.
That's it.
Good, thank you. And yes, it's good to bring these things forward to the public. Go ahead.
If regarding the letter from the MacArthur Drive resident regarding the short-term rental, I would like to make a request to Brian Cummings as the chair of the Police Services Board, and just ask that this be included on the next Police Services Board agenda for discussion with the detachment commander with regards to if there was criminal activity and the police response, and if we could have a report back to council.
Okay. Very good. Yes, and I think that the point that you brought out about John Dubo, I think that was quite an accomplishment, and congratulations to John for sure. Okay, that is it. So do we have any further? No?
Well, just if we do, I do believe that we need a motion as far as providing a proclamation or a letter to support the two statements from the township of Severn and the town of Wasaga Beach.
And are you making a motion to that?
I'm just asking for guidance from our clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, we did receive two of those motions. I suspect they're both different. I don't have them in front of me. I think direction could be given which one specifically we're going to support, or if we're just supporting both of them by responding, or if we're going to attempt to pass our own motion. I guess I'd be looking for clarification. Also, an alternative would be a staff report on the matter to give a full explanation of the situation and the potential impacts.
Because the bill itself has already passed, it may be worthwhile to have a staff report as to what the effects may be and how we can move forward with it.
Thank you, Your Worship. That being said, I would suggest that it be added in the Finance and Corporate Services section as a referral item.
Okay, we are good. So on the SIP, need a mover and a seconder. Councilor Rose, Councilor Whittemore, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. And then we are moving on to the council information, or to the Transportation and Environmental Services section 6, and I will pass it on to Councilor Clue.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our consent agenda tonight, we have 3 items. The recommended action is that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. They are the memo to Committee of the Whole regarding the Fox Street Sewage Treatment Plant inspection for 2021, wastewater treatment plants key performance indicators, report WW 2022-04, and the notice of study commencement for the municipal snow storage location, municipal class environmental assessment. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the recommended action? Councilor Rose, Councilor Levy is seconded. Are there any comments or questions on any of these items? I see none. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving to matters for consideration. The first item tonight is the 2022 Asset Management Plan, report ENG 2022-11, which we've just had a presentation on. The recommended action is that council approve the 2022 Asset Management Plan and that staff be directed to make the approved 2022 Asset Management Plan publicly available on the Town of Penetanguishene's website. Can we have a mover and a seconder, please, for this? Councillor Sanoma has moved it. Councillor Mayat has seconded. Comments, questions? I know we've had an opportunity to already ask comments or questions of our presenter. I would like to thank staff and the whole team on this one. This is a beast. I know my brain was overloaded with information, very complex stuff. It's very important stuff. So I urge everyone to look at it. I'm happy to see this is going out to the public. I'm hoping we might be able to put this in a digestible format. Perhaps at least the PowerPoint presentation that we saw tonight might be a good way to do that. And otherwise, thank you. So all in favor of this one? That is carried. Thank you. The next one is the Enterprise Fleet Management Program Report RDS 2022-14. The recommended action is that the town enter into an agreement with Enterprise Fleet Management to have town-owned vehicles under the specified capacity and excluding all fire department vehicles transitioned into the leasing program. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Sanoma, seconder. I'll look at Deputy Mayor. Comments or questions on this item? I believe it's fairly straightforward, but Councillor Vadamokur, go ahead.
Just briefly, Madam Chair, I just want to commend staff on being creative and looking at this as a program to save taxpayers in the community significant dollars over the life of the program.
Absolutely great. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? I see none. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The third item is proposed amendments to Bylaw 2018-12, the procurement policy. Report ENG 2022-12. Recommended action is that the procurement policy be amended as outlined within the staff report and that the clerk be directed to bring forward the necessary updated procurement bylaw for consideration. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Cummings, seconder, Councillor Vadamokur. Comments or questions on this one? I don't see any. Is there anything to add to our director?
Through you, Madam Chair, unless there's any specific questions, I think the changes to the bylaw are fairly straightforward and outlined in the report.
Thank you. So all in favor for this item? That is carried. Thank you. The fourth item is no winter maintenance of trails, pathways, and walkways. Report RDS 2022-16, the recommended action that the no winter maintenance of trails, pathways, and walkways policy, RDS 2022-01, be approved as presented. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Levy and a seconder. Councillor Mayat, comments or questions? Okay, I see none. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And on to our referrals. The recommended action is that the Transportation and Environmental Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. We have 3 remaining here. 2022 budget request for roadwork at Robert Street East and Dufferin, stormwater management best practices and engineering standards, and the Robert Street crossing, Owen and Scott Street. Do we have a mover and a seconder for these 3? Councillor Sanama, Councillor Cummings is seconded. Any changes, any comments? I don't see any. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And on to question period for media and public. Nope, I don't see any, so I'll turn it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you,
Your
Councillor.
Worship,
Yes.
if I may. Councillor Sanama brought forward the information that we got from our Member of Parliament, Adam Chambers, about boundary change. And I really think we need to look at this. We need to comment. They're proposing that Simcoe North will be called Penetang Kuchiching. I think we need to look at this. So I would like to have this brought forward at another meeting so that we can have a discussion. Very important. I mean, we're quite happy being Simcoe North, are we not? And I mean, if that's the conclusion, we should write in to the government that that's what we want to see. Anyway, Councillor Sanama, thank you for bringing that forward.
May I make a comment?
I'll look to Your Worship. I don't know if this falls under transportation,
No,
environmental. Madam Clerk.
I'm out of sequence. I realized that it was forgotten.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we're most definitely talking about something that's not currently on the agenda, but might I suggest Council now has an opportunity to consider what Deputy Mayor has said and that potentially it be added as a referral item in Finance and Corporate Services.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clue. Moving on to section B7, Recreation Community Service. Pass it to Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our consent agenda this evening, we have recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. We have 5 this evening: the Curling Club minutes dated August 9th, 2022, the public Penetang Machine Public Library report dated September 2nd, memo to the Committee of the Whole regarding the land acknowledgement update, all Things Canadian Summary Report, RCS 2022-16, and the Overhead Bridge Road Drainage and Trail Erosion, RCS 2022-18. Can I have a mover for this? Councillor LaRose, second. Councillor Vadabancourt. I know Deputy Mayor wanted to make a comment regarding one of these.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to remind people to look at the minutes from the library. Our library is a very busy place, and I would encourage the public to drop into the library. They are having another COVID vaccine clinic, which is scheduled for October 6th from 11 to 5. So if people are looking to get vaccinated, I would suggest that they keep that in mind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions, concerns? No, seeing none, I'd call for the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We have one matter for consideration this evening, and that's the wigwam and drying racks. The report is RCS 2022-17. Recommended action here is that the staff offer the resulting supplies from the wigwam and the drying racks in Rotary Champlain Wendat Park to community partners as outlined under option 3 of this report. I need a motion. First of all, Councillor Sanama, second Councillor Vadabancourt. I do have the director here to kind of explain it to council and maybe to the public about what's going on down there.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. The
those pieces of infrastructure that are down in the park were actually introduced following the Rendezvous Champlain event. They weren't purchased to be permanent structures within the park. However, when the celebrations were complete, a decision was made to put them there for the public and community to enjoy for the rest of their useful life. We had this report coming to council, was published Friday at the same time that some members of the community decided to take them down themselves. So they have been destroyed essentially. So we have no choice now but to deal with the remaining pieces of the structures. So the recommendation remains the same, is that we look to offer the remaining supplies of any value to some of our partners in the community. But there are other options in there if council wanted to introduce some funds in the next budget process to restore them and reintroduce them to the park.
Thank you, Director. Is there any questions regarding this report? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Coming up on our referrals and to upcoming agendas, the recommendation is that the Recreation and Community Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. We have one item, which is shade plan for parks, program, playgrounds and dog park. I need a motion, first of all. Councillor Sanama, second. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Are there any additions to this referral list? I have one, if no one else has. We talked at our section meeting this week. There has been a concern about the municipality offering to encourage outdoor activities. However, we have no washroom facilities around these activities. So there are two places in particular I'd like to see washroom facilities, whether it be porta potties or whether it be buildings, and that's at Memorial Park and McGuire Park. McGuire Park is only, the washrooms are only open when we have summer staff so that they can open and close and clean. They now are closed, so we have pickleball courts down there with no washroom facilities. I hate to see people going to the washroom in a bush, and our playground is in the same park. The same thing with Memorial Park. It's downtown. Our tennis courts are being revisited as far as resurfacing are concerned. And I think there's a real need to have washroom facilities at that park. So I'd like, if I could, to have that added to our list of referrals. I'd like to see it in the budget process and the operating budget for 2023, if possible, just to look at ways we can provide the facilities down there, whether it be a permanent building, whether it be porta potties, and sort of the costs of having to do this. But I think really if we're encouraging outdoor activities, we should have proper washroom facilities in those areas. So I would need a motion. I am making the motion to put that as a referral. I second it by Councillor Levy. So all in favor of that motion? That is carried. Thank you. And all, believe all in favor of the other motion for the shade plan. That all in favor? That's great. Thank you. Next, the question period from the media and the public, and I see none. So it's back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. We will now move on to 8, which is a section of Planning and Community Development Services, and I will pass it to Councillor Levy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with the consent agenda. Recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. Bylaw Enforcement Monthly Report, June, July, and August 2022. Memo to Committee of the Whole, complete application for zoning bylaw amendment file number ZA 3 2022 69 Polish Avenue. Memo to Committee of the Whole, complete application for zoning bylaw amendment file number ZA 4 2022 and draft plan of subdivision file number Pen Sub 2022 221 Fox Street. Memo to Committee of the Whole, Ontario Land Tribunal Appeals Update. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Cummings, Councillor Vadavant-Court. Any questions, any concerns? Seeing none, all in favor? And carried. Thank you very much. Matters for consideration. Street names for Champlain Shores subdivision. 200 Fox Street, PL 2022-45, that the following street names be approved for the Champlain Shores subdivision at 176 and 200 Fox Street, file number Pen Sub 2019-01. Navigator Lane, Quarry Lane, Hope Lane, and Magazine Way. I think you'll see a theme there. May I have a mover for that? Councillor Vadavant-Court, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubo. Any questions, concerns? No, didn't think so. All in favor? And carried. We move on to referrals to upcoming agenda and staff. Referrals at the Planning and Community Development Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. Future agenda items, regulation and licensing options for short-term rentals, Blue Drive Road options, site plan control review, municipal accommodation tax, and any, first I'll take a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Cummings, seconded by Councillor Vadavant-Court. Any additions or to the referrals? No, seeing none. All those in favor? And carried. I thank you very much. Questions from the media and public? We have none. Oh, we have a public. How could I miss you? Joe. Seeing none, I will turn it back to the mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Levy. And with that, we will move on to Section 9, Finance and Corporate Services, and I turn it to Councillor Sandoval.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. On the consent agenda, we have two items. The recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee meeting minutes of July the 25th, and the results of the 51 Dunlop Street future use public consultation, report CL 2022-07, including the survey responses report. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Cummings, seconder, Councillor LaRose. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Matters for consideration. There's one item. It's regarding the financing of 51 Dunlop Street. It's a financial update and an internal loan. Finance report 2022-22, that a loan from the Hydroelectric Commission, a reserve fund for the funding required for the purchase, demolition, and abatement of 51 Dunlop Street be approved in the amount of $929,355, and that the loan terms are set as follows: 2% per annum with a 20-year amortization, repayable in blended annual payments of principal and interest of $56,836 from 2023 to 2042. And further, that the annual repayment be included in the town's budget until it is repaid in full. And finally, that the clerk be directed to bring forward the next necessary bylaw for council approval. If I could have a mover, Councillor Mayotte, a seconder, Deputy Mayor Dubo. Any questions or concerns, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Thank you. The referrals to the upcoming agenda. Obviously, we're going to have a couple added. Now, let me find the right spot. The one item regarding Simcoe North, the change of the boundary and the name change. The challenge with bringing that forward as a referral is that the meeting and the information session is actually for September 20. You have to, if you want to do something, it has to be done by September the 25th, and there is a public meeting on September the 26th. So that being said, if we want to discuss that, can we discuss that now?
Discuss how we're going to proceed or discuss the issue?
We'll discuss the issue and
that would be at the call of the mayor to add that item without notice. I don't recommend it just because it is not something we've given accountability and transparency to our public to start having this conversation without them knowing we were going to have this conversation. But understanding the time frame limits that are on the table, I'll ask the mayor to make that decision.
Madam Clerk, I agree with you that I don't think it's the appropriate time. What I do recommend, and I know that I've seen it and I actually have responded to it. So I think that it should be something that we individually do, because the time frame and time on is September the 26th. So I think that we should individually respond, and at the same time, maybe indicate to friends and family that they could do the same.
Sorry,
Mr. CAO, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Worship. The other thing I would suggest, I don't think we've pushed out any corporate comms on this at this point, but the clerk and I were just kibitzing here. I think it's certainly something we can do, given the time sensitivity, to ensure that we're getting it out to the community as best as we can and encouraging the community to get engaged and provide their input. So certainly something from an organizational standpoint that we could take on as well, should council wish.
And is that the wish of council? Yes, so we will move forward with that.
We don't need a mover or seconder. Okay, been so instructed. Thank you.
Through your worship, we can just take that as direction. I'm not going to suggest that we need to formalize it such that we have a motion. We'll take it as direction.
Very good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and you have
the other matter, bear with me, is the Strong Mayors Building Homes Act. And for those that aren't aware, that's the act that was recently passed by the province of Ontario, and it allows a lot of authorization on behalf that the mayor can have. Right now, it's currently just in the two large municipalities of Toronto and Ottawa, but there could be other consequences going forward. So if we could have that added and have staff provide a report to council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have you as the mover, as adding that item, and just requires a seconder and a vote.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Dubo seconded, and all those in favor? Good, thank you, so moved. And the other referral that's on the agenda, that the Finance and Corporate Services section endorsed the following additional and existing referral is in regards to the OPP policing costs and CNCC recovery. It is an ongoing issue. So if I could have a mover to keep it on. Councillor Mayat, a seconder. Deputy Councillor LaRose. All those in favor? So moved. Question period from the media and the public. A public left. Anyways, I will pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sandoval. And council, with that, our committee of the whole meeting is adjourned. So we will now, council, move to our Wednesday, September 14, 2022, immediately following the QOW special meeting and call to order.
Sorry, Your Worship.